recorded. All of the recordings and meeting notes go straight to the website as soon as possible. Sometimes there's a little bit of a delay, but all of those get uploaded onto YouTube, and all the meeting notes get uploaded, just in case you want to go back and see what went down. Okay. Well, thank you all for joining today. This is the first meeting that we've had in, well, we missed May's meeting. We just didn't have a whole lot to update you on, but that is the opposite of this meeting. We have a whole bunch to update you on today. Also, if you could do me a favor and let me know if you do not have audio. If you do not have audio, go ahead and put it in the chat. It helps me know who I can, or who can actually speak on this Zoom platform. So go ahead and do that. Let me know if you do not have audio. Okay. All right, so let's just jump right in. So our meeting goals today are several. I want to discuss some of the DEP meeting updates that we've had and go over our draft 1 BMP reductions. As you remember, we did submit our BMP list to the state. That was at the end of April. We just got our results back last week, and I wanted to go over those with you. I also want to strategize our BMPs and future CAST model runs. And embedded in that is covering some peer group updates and some meeting schedule changes. We'll also be going over our current prioritization strategy. As you know, we do have an implementation and prioritization peer group. And as part of our effort to be as transparent as possible about our process, we'll go over what we came up with so far. And it's constantly changing and evolving. So we'll go over what we have right now. And then we'll move on to some next steps. So in our agenda, we've got DEP meeting updates. That'll be first. And then second, we'll review our BMP reductions. We'll go over changing draft benchmarks, those BMP reductions, the dates that we actually have internally set to send those in. Those are changing, as are the peer group meeting schedules. And of course, like I said, our draft prioritization strategy. And then we'll go on to next steps. All right. So last week was a really big meeting week. We had our midpoint check-in meeting with DEP. This is something that all of the participating counties engage in. We had ours on the 17th. And I wanted to include some of the big takeaways from this meeting. So what we learned was that we want to be as specific as possible about our resource needs and our recommendations. I know right now the way we were doing it was kind of broad. It was like, you know, we were saying, oh, we need more staff, oh, we need more money, we need more incentives. But from what we've heard, DEP really wants to see specific things, like what we need X resource to be able to achieve X outcome. And it sounds like if we do that, it's almost like if you ask for it, it will come. Or a better way to say it would be, if you ask for it, we will do all the advocacy that we can to make sure that it does happen. Because if they give us the resources to do the goals that we want to achieve, that means, you know, just doing a straight cost-benefit analysis. If we reduce our loads, then that means it's cheaper in the long run for the state and for us. So specifically things like, what would we like to do that other counties have done? I know that we've had some discussion about some things that, you know, I think we were talking more specifically about ag-related practices or incentive programs that other counties have and other states have participated in. So if we actually are specific about what exactly it is we would like to do that other places have done, we can put that in. What changes would we like to make to existing practices? A good example of that is like the Transect survey. As most of us know, the Transect survey is imperfect. It's just a snapshot in time, very much like the census. So covering some of the gaps that the survey does not cover and being specific about that is important. So again, with the Transect survey example, what recommendations do we have to improve it? Things like if we had, being specific about what can cover those gaps, like another survey, or doing some, just more exploratory research to ground truth some practices. What funding, support, services, or staff would we need to achieve our goals? Again, we need X amount of dollars. We need X type of support, like training. What specific types of training or services? Or we need 3 more staff members to do what we want to do. All right, so that's specific about our resource needs and recommendations. Multiple BMPs can be captured under one project. So this is more of like the back-end technical information. If we have a project like stream bank restoration, that's one project, but multiple BMPs can be embedded in it. And that's something that we didn't really know previously. And if we went back through our submission and just restructured it to better explain what else is going on with these projects, we would probably get higher reduction loads. And I'll talk about that later. I have the actual submission and what our reductions look like. So we'll go into that in detail later. Land use and watershed location affects reduction rates. So prioritizing hotspot watersheds will be important because it seems like that really does make a difference in what the reduction will be. Projects we can include. There is a reporting caveat, and I'll get to that soon. It turns out we actually can include MS4 projects. We were under the impression that we could not do that, and other counties, I believe, were not including MS4 projects because we understood that we could not include them. It turns out we can, and that's a good thing, because now we will be able to maximize the projects that are already happening in our county. And that's the whole point of really being able to capture what's going on currently and what we can do in the future to build off of that. So this is great news. Section 319 areas, we may not have any in Lycoming County. We need to look into that a little bit further. We can include NRCS projects and any other existing practices that we have going on in our county. Now, okay, the reporting caveat. So we can include things like MS4 projects. The only thing is that we cannot report on them. It's a completely separate and discrete program, and reporting on it would be considered double dipping, and so we can't do that. But we can include those numbers in our CAP. So this is really, really great news. Any questions on this right now? On this midpoint check-in overview that I have here? If you think of something, go ahead and put it in the chat, or we can get to it later in the presentation. I'll move on. All right, so our cast run results meeting, that was also June 17th. Thursday was a big day. So the state has a new BMP template. This BMP template is able to report existing and new BMPs. So for example, if we have a number that we can replace like 2019 numbers with, we can use that. And then we can also build off of that and track projections for future BMP additions. So this is fine-tuning these BMPs in a way that, that we were not able to do in the old template, so this is good. Right now, we're at 4% nitrogen reduction and 8% phosphorus reductions based on our submission. I will have our breakout of exactly what this looks like on our next slides. So because these are not very big reductions, some of the suggestions that were given to us were to use our toolbox recommendations. So we have in our county toolbox, we can also access this on the website, just easy to find. It's like right at the top, big bold letters, it says toolbox. In that, we have a breakdown of the cost per pound of each BMP that the state has suggested that we kind of explore further, because we might have a lot of room to build off of those projects. So the big takeaway was go off of those BMPs and see what you can maximize off of the toolbox that's already been given to us. We also got some detailed comments from DEP on our CAP draft. So the CAP draft being that big template that we've been working in for all of our peer group meetings. We got some detailed comments, and mostly, if I were to condense into categories of what those comments look like, it was mostly be more specific, expand on this idea, or make this into a whole brand new category in and of itself. So these are easy things that we can change. We'll be talking about different ways to categorize these projects that we have right now. Right now we have it structured by peer group because it was easy to just do meetings that way and break it down in that way. But right now, I think we're at a point where we can really recategorize and restructure these projects to fit the model that the other counties have done. So thinking about broad brushstroke priority initiatives, and we'll get to those. We'll kind of fine tune that. I started a draft, and I think it will be a lot easier to manage projects using that instead of the peer group breaking down categories that we've been using. It made sense when we used it, but now we can go ahead and change it. Okay. So just a reminder, these are our BMP, these are our TMDL reduction goals for 2025, this 1.2 million pounds per year of nitrogen and 76,000 pounds per year of phosphorus. Just wanted to put this up as a reminder. And this was what our BMP project submission looked like. These are categories that we could fit the projects that we have listed. We have a lot of projects listed in our CAP template. And so the idea that I just applied different projects under these big categories and put our combined goals for 2025. So our next submission will be much longer and more detailed because this was not the best way to really maximize our load reductions. And this is what we got based off of that submission. So there's that 4% nitrogen and 8% phosphorus. So I think a good goal for us is to maximize the BMPs that we can include for the cheapest cost, again, based on the suggestions that were in our toolbox. And I think that we could probably get to 25–30% reduction. I mean, just based on rearranging the type of projects that we have and submitting them in a way that makes more sense to the model. I think that we can get there. I think that we might have to stretch a little bit and really be creative about what types of resources we need to be able to get there. But I think that's a good goal. You know, if we can get to 25–30% in our second submission, I think we can do it, and I'll be a happy camper for it. So this document is just like a short presentation that has condensed information about what our submission looked like. If you're interested in looking at this document, I'll go ahead and put it on the website. It just is detailed information, technical information about our reduction loads based on what we submitted. So any questions that I can answer quickly right now? And if it is a more technical question, go ahead and put it in the chat and we can get to it a little bit later. And if we don't know the answer to it, we can ask after the meeting. All right. So like I was saying before, we did get our reduction loads back a little bit later than what was anticipated. And because of that, we've really changed what our draft submission benchmarks will be moving forward. So our draft 2 submission was supposed to be the end of June, and now it will be July 6th. And our draft 3 submission was at the end of July, and now it will be Monday, August 9th. So just accommodating for some time frames, like if we're going to assume time frames are like they were before, and I've been assured that it won't be that way, but just in case This is what the new dates will be. And of course, our final draft will be September 30th. Okay. So that's our detailed information about technical BMP reduction, loads, et cetera. So now let's move on to some changes for our peer group meetings. We are going to pause future peer group meetings except for the implementation and the ag peer groups. Implementation, we just really started on this conversation about ways that we can prioritize. So there's some benefit to having the larger group involved and really exploring more in depth about what is good for our county and what makes sense for us. And the ag peer group, there's still a lot of information that we can glean from these different farmers locally. So we'll continue to have those meetings. But everybody else, and those, including members of these two peer groups that will continue, will have one-on-one or small group technical meetings instead. So we will, talk about things like the municipal follow-up from the survey that we did in April. We got 30 responses from this survey, kind of exploring what kind of practices your municipality has done in the past, what you would want to do in the future. If you had unlimited resources, what's your wish list, and what would you need to actually do it? And so I wanted to do some follow-up based off of the answers that I've gotten and some park improvements in municipalities that were noted. So I have some specific follow-up that I wanted to pursue that I think is better served in these one-on-one and smaller technical meetings. Same with the technical ag meetings and the watershed specific meetings. So that, this is a sample of what we would talk about in these smaller group meetings, but I think that makes a lot of sense at where we are right now. We've maximized the amount of projects that we can include, and now what we're doing is structuring it in a way that will directly influence our load reductions, either directly or indirectly, assisting in these projects that will directly affect our load reductions. So we'll contact you to figure out what our schedules will look like for that, but just know that this is what will be changing. And I will put this information, like all the information that we cover and changes, I'll put it on the website, because that's really a resource for you as a stakeholder and for the public, honestly. So let's talk about our draft prioritization strategy. This is what we have currently. This is, I've already gotten some feedback on this model. Things like, this is our big wish list for our Tier 2 secondary scoring weight. But before I talk about that, let me back up quickly and talk about our Tier 1 priority scoring weight. So we will score more heavily projects that have high load reduction capacity or are efficient. So we're calling it project efficiency, and it's really just projects that have the best bang for your buck. So things that are for the cost of the project will have a maximized load reduction based on whatever that project is. So these will be weighted more heavily. And then the secondary scoring weight, these are things that are ancillary and support these projects. And these are things like the planning, do the projects have plans? Are they consistent with a plan? Is it referenced? Does it have its own plan? Technical information, is it, what is the project's proximity to a stream? Are there structures or infrastructure at risk? What's the feasibility? And what's the type of stream impairment? Coordination, project complements other existing work in the watershed, number of contributing partners or entities, and then public support. Does this project have public support, and are there people invested in the project? And are adjacent landowners on board with this project? And then co-benefits, we talked about co-benefits before, these different elements that can that also are being improved by implementing a project. And then, of course, our logistics, project readiness, procurement, and ability to fund 100% of the project. That doesn't mean that one funding source will fund this project, but is the patchwork of funding sources put together going to fund the project 100%? So some of the feedback that I've gotten so far is, hey, this is a lot of information that will take time to actually develop. You know, we have to do some exploring and get some questions answered about projects to be able to answer any of these. So I think the strategy moving forward based on that feedback is, you know, be really strategic about what other information you want to include in this secondary scoring weight tier. So I think that's what the conversations will look like moving forward. Is there anything that jumps out at you right now as you're looking at this? Any kind of feedback or something that you like, something that's missing? Okay. And if there's anything else that you want to comment on regarding this prioritization strategy right now, go ahead and put it in the chat or ask it during at the end of the presentation where we have our questions. Also, just a side note, I'm seeing that a few people have joined us. If you could go ahead and put your name and your affiliation in the chat, that is something that I use internally. And I also put the attendance in our reports to the state. So it's really important that I am accurate in capturing how many people actually came to these meetings. So that's why it's important to be able to see how many people are engaged in these meetings. So go ahead and put your name and affiliation in the chat for those who joined us a little bit later. Okay, moving on. So our next steps are kind of fourfold. We're going to work on our draft 2 submission, and that will look like really strategizing based on DEP's feedback and suggestions. Like I was saying earlier, we got these comments from the state, really detailed comments about what we should be more detailed in. Things like what kind of resources do you need, what kind of money, you know, dollar amount, what kind of dollar amount do you need in funding, what kind of support or training. Oh, I missed one, education materials. That's something that we can be really specific on. If there's a piece of education material that does not exist or something that we'd like to see if it does exist, we can put that in. So one thing that I'm thinking about right now is we're going to be at the Lycoming County Fair. And I have looked up and down and all around, and I cannot find something about the cap that is condensed enough that somebody walking by who has no idea what the cap is can pick it up and within 3 seconds get an idea of what it is. And that seems like not a lot of time, but if you look at things like outreach data or things like outreach videos, 3 seconds is what you have. And if you're scrolling on Facebook, scrolling on Twitter, that's how much time you really allocate to a subject that you're looking at. 3 seconds. Can I understand what it is? Am I invested? Okay, scroll past. And if you don't capture it in 3 seconds, you don't really get a whole lot of other chances to capture the public's attention. And so I'm looking for something like that. And if we can be detailed in that way, in the cap, it's going to help us in the future while we're moving into our implementation phase after we submit our final draft in September. So that's just an example, one specific example of something that I've been thinking about recently. So those are the type of suggestions that DEP has given us. And then, of course, with our draft 2 submission, working toward reducing nutrients. So goal of 25–30% reduction in the second draft, I think we can do it. And I think that we can, if we're strategic about it and looking at the toolbox suggestions of what kind of projects to include, I think we can do it. Okay, meetings. So next steps in meetings, we will reach out to schedule those smaller technical meetings. Like I was saying earlier, we'll probably do a doodle poll, maybe a couple of doodle polls to get general availability, or just reach out directly. Peer group meeting schedules will be updated on the webpage, like I was saying before. And of course, as always, the stakeholder check-in meeting materials and any other event materials will be uploaded onto the webpage. Outreach. We will continue to reach out to the public and to the ag community. So we had a virtual public open house on June 16th, that last week. And it was basically just a public information session. And we will probably be doing at least one more of those, probably toward the end of this project, where we can have a deliverable to really show and get, some kind of, maybe we won't get specific feedback, but just kind of engagement. Are you interested, you public person, landowner, are you interested in implementing any of these projects? Are you, farmer, are you interested in holding workshops and getting that kind of feedback? And like I said earlier, the Lycoming County Fair, we will be there. We won't be there in person 24/7, but we will have some time slots that we will make a physical presence there. Very likely will be around a big event at the grandstand. And I think there's going to be a lot of people at the fair, just because last year it was canceled, and there's probably a lot of people who are really eager to get out and actually be at the fair. I worked there in the Grange building actually for several years, and I'm pretty excited. I'm excited to be there. It's just excellent people watching, very enjoyable. So, all right, these are the two things that I really wanted to touch on in terms of outreach. Also surveys. So we have two surveys that we released after the virtual public open house. Links to fillable PDFs and web surveys are available. It's a SurveyMonkey format. And we've got these ag practices and landowner outreach survey questions. So the ag practices, I know I sent this out a little while ago. Let's see if I can pull it up and share it for you. All right. Ag survey. So we're asking questions like, and it's only to Lycoming County residents only. Asking things like, how many years have you been farming? Are you interested in implementing conservation practices on your farm? Different questions about what kinds of tillage methods you use now and how many acres. Cost share questions. Asking about what kind of agencies or organizations you're working with. And then moving into these conservation practices, would you like to implement any of the following? And then what kind of resources would you need to do it? And what time frame are you looking at? So pretty quick, it's all of 11 questions. And I think that we can glean some really helpful information from this survey. And then we've also got this public survey. And I'm sharing this with you now because I'm going to send this out and hope that you send it along to your people to get a good sample size. So the public outreach survey is a two-part survey. The first one is pollution reducing practices. Asking, are you interested in implementing any of these pollution reducing practices? And also a note that I wanted to put in here is that there's no real technical information in this public outreach survey. The ag survey is a little bit more technical, but it's ag specific. This one is more general. I don't use terms like pervious pavement. I say installing pavement that is water permeable, reducing or eliminating lawn fertilizer use, forested grass buffer along streams, rain capturing gardens. So this is something that hopefully makes sense to anybody who's looking at it, who picks it up off of the street. questions that I ask in here are, what are the practices are you interested in learning more about? And again, moving into these nutrient reducing practices. And then our part 2 is more CAP specific. This is looking at the broad categories of projects. And this is the kind of feedback that I'm hoping to get from the public is, you know, how would you prioritize these broad categories of projects? 1 through 5, you know, conservation farming practices, stream bank improvements, reducing lawn fertilizer use, and really trying to capture what the public prioritizes. And then, of course, these open-ended questions. So I will be sending these out in an email, and I'm hoping that you share these surveys far and wide. And we've also got the link right here. Here's our webpage, the almighty webpage. Here they are, stay involved. This is where the surveys live. And then we have notes about our past events. So that's where they live, just for future reference. All other surveys will be in the same location generally. So that's our outreach. Our outreach strategy also will, of course, include our newsletters that are also on the webpage. And I'll keep you privy to anything else that we're thinking of as far as any kind of outreach. And then our next steps, number 4, prioritization. Of course, improving and refining the scoring system that we use for prioritizing our projects that we have in our CAP. All right, that was a lot of information in a really short amount of time. So what questions do you have, or what concerns do you have right now? Is there anything that sticks out to you in your mind that you want more clarification on?
Eve, it's Andy Bader. I'll ask a question if it's allowed.
Oh, absolutely. Hey, Andy, how are you?
I'm good. So the question I have is with regard to processing time for applications and whether the DEP element has staffed up for an improved processing time. And I ask that question because I'll use the term, I have a friend who is starting a project and was just shocked by the response I got from an engineer about how long it would take the DEP to process an NPDES permit.
Mm-hmm.
Is that kind of discussion going on amongst the counties and DEP?
I know with the counties it is. I thought that Megan was on.
I am on, Eve, and I was going to jump in if that's okay.
Absolutely, yes.
Sure. And this is definitely a case of, you know, like a lot of government agencies, we're fairly siloed. So your response time may vary quite greatly by who you're dealing with, what program, what area within that program, and also what region of the state your friend is in. I don't know if they're in our region or not, but at any rate, I can tell you that the issue with the turnaround time, specifically with running the CAST model, was kind of a perfect storm where right when they were gearing up to do that, they had one person leave and one person go out on maternity leave, which I would assume was expected, but maybe it was a little sooner than they thought. And so there was, you know, with that being the first runs for the tier 3 and 4 and the staffing reduction, it was a bumpy road there and took longer. So I think we've all readjusted our expectations somewhere in the middle of what was originally thought and what actually happened the first time. It should be, I think they're saying plan for around 2 weeks now, I think is what I heard, Eve, from the Bay program.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Now, your question regarding permitting, if you don't mind me asking, do you know what county the project is in or what region the project is in that your friend was discussing?
Well, when I said I have a friend, this is actually a project at my farm, and I'm in Center County.
Okay, okay. Now, are you dealing with the Conservation District or DEP for that permit?
It would be a project through the Conservation District, and our engineer feels that DEP may have to be involved.
Okay, all right. Yeah, so if you have, and I guess this is preliminary, expectations before starting. I can tell you that if you have a project that's there's a timeliness element to it. Maybe you need to construct in a certain season or something like that. If you have a timeliness concern, the best thing is to bring that up front. If you have a pre-application meeting or discussion, and let them know where you're targeting, when you're targeting to do that. We generally in our region, I think we process things fairly quickly. And I'll just share anecdotally my experience. When I worked at the county, we had a project where our engineer came in from another part of the state and said it could take up to a year to get a permit for this. And then I think it was like 6 weeks, and they were shocked. So your mileage may vary, I guess is all I'm going to say. And it definitely depends on the nature of the project and how busy things are and the turnaround time, for that particular program. And I've gone on way too long on this topic, but did that address your question?
I think it does. It was, I was using my own experience so far just to understand whether there might be global time delays when counties across the Susquehanna watershed are suddenly submitting dozens of applications that need processing in Harrisburg, and whether DEP had staffed up for that.
Yeah, no, that is a good question. And I think, I can't remember if it's in there or not, but one thing that could go in as far as the programmatic recommendations, hey, shoot for the moon. If you want to suggest that projects that are included in a CAP would get some kind of prioritization when there's a backlog, you could write that in. Everything froze, so either I shocked everyone or hopefully that wasn't too shocking of a suggestion.
Thank you, Megan.
Yeah, but I think, we're partners in this, right? So we want to always treat all of our applicants fairly, but we know realistically that sometimes some projects have a more urgency to them than others for various reasons. And if one of those reasons, various legitimate reasons, and if one of those reasons is we really need to meet our goal and we're working really hard and stretching here, that's something you always want to bring to attention of the person that's reviewing that. And if you have questions, you can always elevate that to, the regional leadership. We have a local government liaison in our region. Each one has one of those folks, and part of their job is to help when there's, whether it's county, municipality, when there's a local government entity that's having an issue that you can bring to their attention. They're there to help and try to, kind of navigate things for you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
What other questions do you have? Were you surprised by the reduction loads, the 4% nitrogen and 8% phosphorus? Okay. All right. Well, that is, with all the information that we jammed in there, I am going to say that if you have any other information that you'd like to share, any questions that you have, go ahead and reach out, and hopefully we can get some clarity on the subject. So if there is nothing else,
Eve,
anyone?
this is Tim Hyler.
Yeah.
One of the things that came out of one of those meetings last week was that this can basically be your wish list. That, you know, if you look at those charts in the toolbox and how they want thousands of acres of these different things, and well, how could we ever do that? Well, one thing that came up, I think Joe Wickham maybe is the one that said it out of Harrisburg. If you can say, okay, we are going to do so many thousand acres of these different items, but it's going to take this much money and this much staff time to achieve that. Staff that we don't have, that we'd have to hire either temporary or full-time staff. So that way they can show this to whomever, the governor or whoever, and say, look, we could clean up the bay, but we need this many extra $1 million in funding and this many multiple dozen extra staff people to do it. Because if we don't show that there's a huge need for additional money and staffing, nobody knows that.
Yeah.
So that can go to the policymakers. It can go to the, you know, whoever's handing out money, like, look, you want us to do this. Here's what it's going to take to do this. So kind of our first run was, well, what do we think we can do with what we have now? But we should be, or could be, I'm not saying we have to do it this way, but we could be saying, well, here's what we could do if there were no limits on funding or staff. And then they can take that and say, hey, look, give us $1 billion, give us 25 new staff, you know, whatever that those numbers end up being. So I thought that was a really important thing that came out of that, whatever meeting that was last week.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, it's exactly what we're trying to learn from other people, like with the municipal survey that we sent out. I mean, that's almost exactly what we're trying to get with these follow-up questions is, you know, we asked what your wish list would be and what resources you need to do it. And now we're trying to figure out exactly what that is. And that, I mean, that's exactly what this CAP process is too. So that's a perspective that we needed to hear to really bring home the, you know, this idea that you can be specific, you know, ask for help, you know, ask for specific help to be able to get where you want to be. And that's exactly right. We were doing planning based off of what resources we have right now without additional. And we didn't really make the case that if we had these additional resources, we'd be able to do more, because that's just not how we were planning. So now that idea is kind of driven home for us, even better. Thank you.
I think that's this last discussion that Tim started. This is basically essentially the same question I asked. Is there enough staff to timely process all of the applications that are needed to go in to make this work? And I think I kind of heard the answer was no at this time.
Yeah, emphatic no.
And
yeah,
so,
with what we have right now, nope.
So the process of developing the budget for that needs to happen at DEP and go through the legislative process. And I'm just curious, you know, how is that being managed? Who's figuring that out?
That's a great question.
Are you talking specifically about DEP staff, Andy? Because I think that your comment, to me, it also encompasses conservation districts and you know, other county agencies that are working on this.
I think it does. I think it encompasses everybody who's in an approval or an assistance mode, but not necessarily the people that are boots on the ground or the landowners or people like that. Because that's the first hurdle to get this done. And I asked my question originally when I got the proposal from a professional engineer, and I said, you know, if it's going to take a year and 100 days to get something approved, there are a lot of people that are going to lose interest. We need to get things moving a lot faster.
Yeah,
I'm
and I'll just
taking your
point
note
out,
down, Andy, right now.
I think a lot of folks probably are aware of this, but I'll just point out that with DEP, we have delegation agreements with the conservation districts. You know, we have 14 conservation districts in our region, and there's I guess a fairly wide variety or range of programs that they do. I mean, most of them do some of the basics, but there are, you know, delegations that go to a higher level that, you know, give more authority to the conservation districts and what types of permits that they can issue under DEP's auspices. So, you know, that's something else possibly to consider, that if you feel that there's a staffing issue or a turnaround time issue, you know, maybe pushing, and I don't want to say, you know, I'm not talking Lycoming specifically, but I guess just something hasn't really been talked about that we might want to think about, you know, Bay watershed wide. Is there a need for more delegation to the districts and giving them more staff to do things that, you know, that they're capable of doing, put it that way. I mean, some of the districts in the region have engineers on staff, you know, it varies quite widely. And what's interesting is it seems like the amount of staff does not necessarily correlate to population or land area. It's more correlated to how much work did they take on.
This is Carrie at the Conservation District. I think the question might be raised about the permit decision guarantee. So like MPDS permits, I think have 107 days that it could take for review. I know the I work with the general permits more often, have like 93 business days. So you're looking at 4 to 5 months for a review. And maybe that's the question, if that should be shortened. But yeah, they do have a set amount of days that they could take.
And that's assuming everything that is submitted the first time is good enough.
Correct.
If there's lots of technical deficiencies and it takes the engineer a while to get back to DEP to correct those deficiencies, that just adds to that time frame.
Yeah, and I'll just share, I don't know, Tim got cut off there. Did you get to finish, Tim?
Yep, I think.
Okay. We may not have heard it all, but one thing I've heard internally that I think maybe, again, Eve, as you're thinking about programmatic recommendations to put into this, and I've heard that there's a mindset sometimes of trying to really help and work with an applicant that sometimes goes a little too far when there's just a bad application and it's got fatal flaws. I've heard internally, like, you are allowed to just deny it. You don't have to work, you know, deny it and tell them like there are fatal flaws, go back and start over kind of thing. And that actually helps in the long run rather than trying to, you know, fix something that's broken, so to speak. And I think there's always that hesitancy to deny something because it makes you, you know, seem like you're being mean or something. But in some cases that can actually help move things along faster in the long run. So that's something else to consider, I guess. With permit decision guarantee, you don't necessarily want to run down that clock only to end up with something that can't be issued and then start the clock over again, is what I'm saying. It's better to just cut it and start over, I think, in some cases.
Hey, Megan. 5 or 6 years ago at the All Bay meeting, they had said that DEP would need 62 inspectors to achieve the goal of 10% of the inspections every year.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any talk, like at levels above us, we're assuming, well, is there any talk of doing any kind of like reallocation of what a district does versus DEP? Like, are they trying to get inspectors and R50 would go away, they pick it up. Like those kind of talks going on with EPA for funding.
I'll be honest, I haven't heard anything like that. And part of that is probably just being, you know, the fact that we've been focused on the last year, we transitioned to almost all telework and trying to keep efficiency. So I haven't heard anything like that, but my guess would be any kind of discussions like that have kind of been pushed to the side, you know, with the whole fire drill that the whole world went through with COVID. But again, I'm just throwing things out there, and I think, Rod, that's a good point. You know, anything that you want to bring up in the calls, you know, with the Bay program, or also, you know, in a draft for the programmatic recommendations, feel free to put it in there and open those discussions, even if it's something that, you know, like that, and something you heard years ago, bring it back up and see where that stands.
Yeah, because a good point that somebody else made in one of our meetings last week was that if we are saying it in our cap, there's a good chance that we're not the only ones. And if there's a lot of counties saying the same thing, giving the same recommendations, well, that adds more weight to the subject. So.
Yep, and sometimes I think as humans, we have a tendency when we think everybody knows what that something's a problem, but it's uncomfortable. Nobody comes out and says, "Hey, this is a problem." And I'm saying, I think we're really giving everybody permission. Tell us what the problems are. And sometimes we know what the problems are too, but we need it, you know, we need other people to say it, and we need it in writing to go to the decision makers and say, okay, this is documented, this is a problem. Not just, you know, DEP perceives it to be so.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I guess I'll just say, Lycoming has a real advantage in that your state senator is, I believe he was or is the chairman of the Bay Commission. And Garth Everett was very involved. Maybe it was Garth that was the, and of course he's retired since, but we have historically in Lycoming County had a strong legislative voice and role in Bay issues. And so you have resources there as well to help advance some of these more programmatic ideas and help push for those.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good point.
And Senator Yallah has been very active on introducing bills relating to agriculture and fertilizer that, you know, impact the Bay. So I don't know if you've engaged his office much at this point, but that definitely, as you move into implementation phase, definitely is another good resource.
Yeah, that's true. Anything else?
I'm sorry. I think I meant Bay Commission. I think I said Bay Program or something else. There's an alphabet soup of Bay agencies, so sometimes.
Yeah, there's so many. There's so many.
Yes. Okay. So as of last January, he became the new chairman of the Tri-State Chesapeake Bay Commission. So my memory did serve me correctly on that one.
Nice. Awesome. Thank you. Anything else that you have your mind on? Going once? Going twice? Okay. All right. Well, thank you all very, very much for your time. I really appreciate it. This will be interesting. We'll have a quick pivot on our strategy here, and I think it'll make our lives easier. So I'm excited for these next steps that we have. And I optimistic side. You know, we can only go up. We can only make it better moving forward. So this is all good news. So, alrighty, y'all. I will talk to you later. And until then, enjoy this weather and have a wonderful day.
Thank you, Eve.
Thank you.
You too. Thanks, Eve.
Thank you.